Okay, this is OK here, and the last time I streamed classical chess, it was looking at the games of our board 8, 0. This time I'm going to be streaming the games of all our boards, but just in the first 2 weeks of the season 17 of Lichess4545. It's been rather a thrilling first couple of weeks with both its ups and its downs. Just an introduction first to Lichess4545. People online often play Bullet and Blitz, but unless you can trust your opponent's not going to sort of quit in the middle of a game, people don't play that much classical, and that's why Lichess4545 was set up 16 seasons ago now. And originally it was teams, there was much smaller teams, but over the years it's got larger and larger. Now it's teams of 8 boards, and you can see the top boards are usually about 2,000 plus. Board 2 is now about 1900 to 2000. Board 3 about 18 something to 1900, all the way down to board 8, which is around under 1550 or so. And here you can see some of the team names, like endgame spoilers, and yeah, lots of fun names. Dr. Robotnik, oh no you don't. Smother of Dragons, who are our opponents in round 1, and incidentally, endgame spoilers were our opponents in round 2. Imagine Hyper-Accelerated Dragons, the Night Watch, the Night King, Avengers middle game, and our own team, enough with the V2 Tarash talk, haters can exit. V2 victorious, check please. Lichess Lovers Rewind, Lichess Lovers being the team that won last season, and Pornhub Second Coming. And as well as the teams, there are also alts on every board. So if someone is unavailable, like as you can see, for example, Sesquipedalism is busy this week, then someone who's an alt can help substitute him for them, and that helps the league run smoothly. So in week 3 at the moment, and I just want to give a recap of some of the games in the first 2 weeks. And I'm going to give them in the order they were played rather than in the order of the boards. So actually the very first game of our team was my game against Roso 97. And it was my first classical game with the new V2. So I was trying to set up move confirmation, and I was trying to set up the board dimensions in a way that was nice. And also I was experimenting with the new piece sounds, trying out having the piece sounds actually speak the moves, which is a really cool idea, and I think I might try that in blindfold chess. But for standard chess, I thought it was a bit distracting, and so I was busy trying to turn it off again. And in my distractions, I was planning on playing a King's Indian, classical King's Indian, but in my distraction, I played e4, a move too early. And while I was trying to sort everything out, I came back and my opponent was still thinking. Funny thing is, this actually isn't a novelty in classical chess, but taking it, the obvious and indeed the best move, is in fact a novelty. Because Shirov played e4 against Judith Polgar, and she turned down the sacrifice and ended up drawing a King's Indian game, a classical King's Indian. So of course, just in case anyone doesn't know the classical King's Indian, it goes like this. So I'll go from the beginning: d4, knight f6, c4, g6. Not that. Knight c3 first in order to support the central push. Black has to play d6 to prevent the knight being harassed. Castles, bishop e2, and yes, and it goes on. In some order, and then e5 usually first. Okay, so yeah, usually e5 first, and then castles, knight c6. This would be the classical King's Indian. Sometimes after knight e8, bishop to e3, so that this can be met with this immediately. So when the bishop is attacked, it can drop back here. And then the bishop's a really good defender of the king, so it's very important to get that bishop there. And so you delay this move until the bishop's snug on f2. And then a mistake that some people sometimes make is they move back this knight before this one. And I think something, I suppose, rook c1, they might do something like this. And I'd say that's just a slight mistake, because white's play initially is on c7. So there might sometimes be some benefit in just keeping that knight there just to move longer, move this knight first. And this knight later. But having said that, it makes no difference. Like, moving this is completely fine. But there are some instances where just holding that knight there just to move longer is beneficial. But anyway, what happened in the game is I played this and the sacrifice was taken. So we're already out of book. So I guess I had to play this as a gambit. So although I think whenever you take a pawn, you lose time. But it's not a very good gambit because you're losing a central pawn, your e-pawn. So the only point would be if you could somehow play down the e-file in some way. So I just tried to develop quickly. So I'm hitting the knight just to try and gain time. Castles, knight c3, d5. So d5 is a good move, and not a move he could have played if I had my pawn on e4, obviously. And so what I played is rook to e1, just trying to grab the open file, but I'm not really looking at. There's no real play down the e-file. But I'm just doing my best to try and claim some compensation for the missing pawn. And here I think black made a slight inaccuracy. He played rook to e8. There's really no need. There's no threat down the e-file. And black's best move is just to develop his king side. For example, knight to c6 puts pressure on the center. And another reason why rook to e8 is not so good, in my opinion, is if this exchange ever happens, there's then going to be pressure on f7. I can't edit easily, unfortunately. So unfortunately, if I edit, that's going to mess up the board slightly. But I'm just making that a small edit. Okay, is the board looking okay? I hope it's looking okay. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, okay. So hopefully everything's okay. So rook to e8. But here I think I made a bigger mistake myself. I played c5. And it's a bigger mistake because it closes down the center, and obviously I have a lead in development, and I want somehow to create activity. c5, first it closes down the center, and secondly, it's encouraging black to just provoke this c5, and well, I'll show why in a second. But let's show maybe if I played more. The reason I didn't play something like this is because I was thinking I'd get an isolated queen's pawn. But it's just quite instructive to see, suppose, say, black went c6, h3, there's a slightly annoying idea in the position of bishop coming to here. So suppose you could just play h3 to stop that, takes. These are all sort of considered best moves. And actually the best move for black in this position is just to move the rook back. And so, for example, the game might continue like this, putting pressure on e7, b5 hitting the bishop, and so on. But just to give an idea of how dangerous this position is, suppose black were to play knight b to d7. Can anyone in chat see a move for white here? So this is if I'd gone down, instead of playing c5, which is what I did, suppose instead I just do other developing moves and I'm not afraid to get an isolated queen's pawn. And suppose black were to play a move like knight b to d7, which on the face of it looks fairly reasonable, supporting potentially a future. Maybe intending to come here next, and maybe even to come here, maybe. Parking the knight in front of the isolated queen's pawn is often a very good idea. But can you see a tactical reason why it's not a good idea in this position? Okay, chat, you're going to have to come alive. Okay, well, I'm going to tell you this time, but next time you're going to have to give me the answer. Bishop takes pawn. So what's the idea? Of course, it's a fork of the rooks, so if you don't take it, I'm taking the rook, so I have to take it. Then knight g5. And suddenly you're kind of, oops, if your king drops back, the knight here is forking the king and the queen. And if the king goes here, I have queen here check. And again, if the king goes into the corner, I've got the knight coming here, picking up the queen. So the best move for black would be something like trying to block with a piece, but then we just take it. And if you take back, we have the same problem. And again, if you go this way, obviously it's just checkmate on f7. So black's best move here is actually to give up the piece. So already the situation is quite serious. Although we sacked a piece, but we get the piece back and we have a very nice attack on the black king. I mean, just to turn the engine on, for example, here. Knight to c7 is on, yeah, forking the two rooks. And then this pawn is also very weak, so serious stuff. So that's if bishop to f4. Another idea is just simply, instead of waiting for black to force us to have an isolated pawn, is just to get an isolated pawn ourselves. And I'd have thought this position was not ideal, but our rooks are both coming to half-open files. There's no direct pressure here. There's certain direct pressure on c7, I would say. I'd have been slightly worried about this square. But let's see, is there anything? So just to see why this isn't anything. So taking doesn't work, but oh, yes. You don't take back immediately, but you can just attack the queen with it. So you've got a double attack now on the queen and on the bishop. So that's very hard to meet. Yeah, that was a tactic. Yeah, so it's important to realize these discovered pins. So there isn't, you're not losing a pawn at the end of this line. You can just, or you don't need to defend this pawn even, you just develop normally, put pressure on c7, probably play c6 or something. Yeah, just bring the rooks to the open files. Okay, so just if I have to turn the engine on, c6 would be the best move. Queen c1 is good. Doesn't like rook c1. Well, what's wrong with rook c1? It's not as good because of, I see this pin becomes a problem. That's instructive. So in fact, queen c1 is even better. And then this pawn is not being picked up. Just to check, why is that? Why is this pawn not being picked up? Is there some pressure here? You take, and bishop to e5. Oh, I see. So something I hadn't even noticed going on. So he goes here to try and stop queen h6, and then you have rook to e4. Okay, so he has to try and, he could push his queen back to here, but then we can kick it again. So the other alternative is he blocks, but that's also not going to work. It's going to fall to the same move potentially, or even faster. Just either bishop e2 or f3. Both are picking up a piece. So I'll just turn the engine off again. That's very interesting. Take f3. So it shows how this position, which white is a pawn down, with accurate play, there's enough activity and interest that things could go wrong very quickly. If you were to do a move like bishop takes d4, takes, and already they're suddenly mate threats. So a better move for black would be something like knight to d7 here. Okay. Okay. So bishop takes d4 would be a blunder. Okay. But going back to the game, I played c5. And as I said earlier, c5 is a mistake because it blocks up the center, and this can immediately be challenged. And the problem with being challenged by b6 is if I take it, he's bringing his pawns closer to the center. And if he takes me, I'm losing my center. And I've already lost e4, then I'd be losing my d pawn as well. So c4 is very bad. So just to go through that line, b6, the best I could do is probably b4. If you take a takes, his pawn's getting closer. And you're opening up the rook file, so he's got activity here. So here he's got two options. He could either take, and go bishop to e4, and at some point e5 is coming. And these two pawns are hanging pawns, there's nothing supporting them, and they'll soon fall. So for example, if I go bishop e2, c6, knight here, trying to stop the e5 push, just doing my best, this would be the best attempt to protect my weakness. f6, so eventually he's breaking through, and there you see that his pawn majority in the center is coming to fruition. So that would be an attempt to stop e5. So this stop e5 with bishop e2 and putting the knight on e5. Another way he could play, instead of taking immediately the pawn on c4, is he could play this move here. And this actually is also good for black. And the best response from white would be to take here. And there's a sort of very sharp line. You're taking here, take here. That would be the normal sequence. But now you're taking here, taking the queen. Taking the pawn with tempo because you're hitting the queen. And then you're moving the knight again with tempo, hitting the queen. So you're surviving for a few moves, but if he takes en passant, what's the problem? Yeah, the problem with taking en passant is the rook would fall. So big problem. Bishop g4, takes, develops. Okay, so you get this kind of position. So it was much more complex. But again, ultimately, black is still a pawn up, and he's going to have a lot of play down this A file. So that's why the play down the A file is going to be the reason why black is much better. But instead of playing b6, which is a very natural move, he played another very natural move, but slightly less good, this pin, which is rather annoying. But the one thing which is okay about it is I can play this, and if he drops back, I trap the bishop. Apparently bishop e2 is also apparently a little bit more solid for it, playing like this and routing the bishop, targeting the center. Takes here, rook takes, so the swap of rooks, and I take here. I have enough, do I? So I have enough to win that pawn. Takes, takes. c6 is natural, knight c3, just so I don't lose my queen. The queens are exchanged, rook to d8. So now in this position I've actually won back my pawn. Bishop to g5, hitting the rook, rook to d7, and rook to b1, just getting off the diagonal of the bishop and protecting this pawn. So I can push this pawn b4 without worrying about this long diagonal. So yeah, so what was interesting in this line, actually, I can put a lot of pressure on this center. Of course, black could just defend with e6 and hold on to the pawn, but actually black gets quite a lot of activity by not holding on to the pawn. So if I were to go back and say in this position, go with e6, black is still better in this position, but bishop f4. Now the e5 push isn't on, and yeah, okay. So black has a slight advantage. Black is not better. Black is slightly better. But maybe this position is not so obvious, the extra pawn, because for the moment there's quite good control. But I'm sure actually that, yeah, exactly, that's why knight to d7 is the best move. I was just thinking it myself, because that way you've got a lot of forces on that one square, and I think this must be very good for black as well. There's no containing. Black's going to just run over the center. Okay, but what happened in the game is I played h3. So if he drops back, I just the threat, as it were, is this. If he drops back, I don't know how to symbolize that, but okay. If he drops back, I do that. So he takes, I take back. So I'm slightly worried about this pawn, but okay. And knight to c6 is targeting that weak pawn. And you already see the pressure I'm under. So firstly, I only have one move to defend this pawn. In the game I was considering, what if I go bishop to e3? And it doesn't work because of e5, threatening an immediate e4. And the problem is if I take that pawn, then he has d4. No, that's not right. He doesn't have d4. He has... If I take the pawn, what does he have? He has knight takes first. Yeah, knight takes first, hitting the queen, and then then e4 might come. So if I'm going to stop e4, I'd have to go here. But then the knight, I think the queen can just be chased away from defending this square. Is that right? No. So the queen has to defend the bishop. That's the thing. So the queen has to drop back, either to here or here. To defend the bishop, and then this move is coming. So I can't take it. And if I just back off, well, the pawn takes pawn is coming. So it's just too serious a threat. So there's nothing I can do. So apparently there is something I can do. There's bishop here, bishop to b5, so that when he takes it with this fork, I can take this piece. And he can't take one of these two pieces because I'm taking the rook. So the rook has to go desperado, and it's just forced to go desperado, but just because it's under attack from the bishop. So I have to take back because it's attacking my queen. Now I've got a choice. Do I take the bishop or the knight? Again, if I take the knight, the bishop's going to take this pawn. But if I take the bishop, then then white can get his center back. So I'm not sure. So taking the knight is good because you still have a threat on b2. The white bishop then has to take here, is forced. And do we take on b2 or not? So apparently rook to b8 is even stronger hitting the bishop. So he has to save his piece and then take on b2. And then white has to save his rook. And this is not good because of this, which defends the pawn on d5 and defends the pawn on b2. Well, the pawn on b2 is protected, but it defends the pawn on d5, this move. So a much better move is rook to d1, so we've got now 3 pieces hitting this pawn. And so black might go bishop to f8, and apparently black d5 is defended by the promotion threat on b1. So even though we've got 3 pieces hitting d5, we actually can't take d5 because takes... I should just run through the line. Okay, if I take... So if white takes... Do you really sack your queen? Takes. Queen? No, that's not going to work. So I've done something wrong. Okay, I'm going to have to... If knight takes... So what is the line? If bishop... What I'm wondering is what do I do if bishop takes here? Knight takes is correct. And why can't I take it? Because then I queen. Oh, I see. And when I queen with the threat on this rook. Oh, I see. And if you take that, that comes with check, and then I can save my queen. King h2, and then I can save my own queen. So that way I'm a piece up. Okay, I had got the move order slightly wrong. Okay. So e5 is a problem. And it turns out after knight e2, although there isn't this side here, as there is after bishop to e3, after knight e2 there's still a problem with e5. And as we saw in the previous line, the only defense, which I found in the game, is bishop to b5. But it's only a temporary defense. And what black should have done here is just take on d4, and I can't even take back because of the pin of my rook on d1. So the best I could have done was just take this knight, takes back, try and develop to connect my rooks. And at this point, actually, black could play rook to d4 and actually defend his second pawn that he's won on e4. And even if I could just put my own rooks on it, he can chase away that bishop. And now he's got 3 defenders of the pawn, and I've only got 3 attackers. Still 2 defenders, 2 attackers. So all I can do is blockade the pawn. If it's a pass pawn and you can't defend it, just blockade it. But yeah, black is 2 pawns up and doing very well. And actually another way of doing it is going like this directly, and that's also good. So yeah, definitely taking was good, just because I couldn't even take back. But the move he played in the game was pushing. So he's closing out the center, he's claiming space, but actually this helps me in a way conceal my weaknesses. And what it is, it's playing a much slower game. This is saying, I'm going to do this, this, and overrun your kingside. So this is actually quite a smart move, because it's eventually playing for f3. The disadvantage is it just takes a lot longer to get there. So that gives me the opportunity to make something else happen on somewhere else in the board. It gives me some more time. So where to put the queen, I thought of which squares. Queen c3, queen b3. So the center is always something of concern. So even though this is on the diagonal of the bishop, and therefore you're worried that there may be tactics, it does reinforce the center. What I think I found after the game is queen b3 is quite a nice idea as well, with the idea of queen a4 and maybe hopes of winning back a pawn. It doesn't exactly win back a pawn. Just worth saying that queen to g3 is not particularly good because of knight h5, and black wants to play knight h5 anyway because he wants this f5, f4 push, and that this queen to g3 enables him to play that move with tempo, which is why it's not such a good move. So the move I played is decent, queen to c3, and next move I could take the knight. So this, after rook e7, he gets out of the pin, because this pin is really annoying, there's no way of really defending it. So now I had a choice of whether to exchange my bishop for his knight, and also in doing so doubling up his pawns. So probably actually even better than rook e7 is queen. I said there's no way of getting out of it. Actually, queen to d7 does work, because then you can go like so. And that might be, yeah, but then what next? Yeah, I'm not sure if this is better for black or not. Because you don't have this move. Why don't you have this move? Because if I do this, yeah, that would be an utter disaster. Because it would open up an attack on the knight from the queen. So another reason why c3 ended up being quite a good square. So yeah, I'm not sure queen to d7 actually achieves anything. It just suddenly puts the queen on the diagonal of the bishop. So rook to d7 is quite sensible, and it gives me a choice. Do you want to take this knight or not? And wreck black's pawn structure. And to be honest, I was probably thinking, if I do that, I'm in no rush to do it. But it is a choice I have to make. And I decided not to, because so my pawns are on dark squares, so this bishop is my good bishop. It's one of my best pieces. And also, so what if he has doubled pawns? They would be concealed by, they'd be blocked by my own pawn, and they would actually be quite the weakest. I mean, it'd be difficult to get behind and attack them in any way, is what I'm trying to say. And they would actually be reinforcing his position. This one defending the dark squares, and then a very nice chain here. I mean, potentially in an endgame there could be some play, but in any case, I decided not to, and I just tried to reinforce my own structure. So I show the line if I just did this, b4. Yeah, there's some value, but I'd have to do. It's just not clear where my play is. It's not clear where my play is here either, but just doing my best. And then he took away the choice and decided he's going to reroute his knight clearly to d7. So I just did b4, he does c6, hitting my bishop. Bishop doesn't have any squares to go to here or here, so it has to drop back, like so. And then he did a6. I think he was afraid that I was going to push this pawn. I would say a5 is a more interesting idea, but let's just see. a6 is decent apparently. Yeah, so a6 is actually a very good move in this position. And then I think after the game, I was thinking, not after the game, after I made my next move, I was thinking, I wish I'd done this. Rook e to b1, defending this pawn. So after he reroutes his knight, then dropping back my bishop. And my reason for that, I was thinking, is that if he goes a5, I could go b5. So that was my And then I might be able to open up the b file and get a good attack, while his a file is closed by his own pawn. So this a5, b5 push, sliding past the a5 pawn, is quite an important idea, I think. But instead what happened is I dropped the bishop back immediately. And I had a choice, so I drop here or here or here. And I thought this was probably the best square. I can't really give my exact reasons for it. And I was very worried at this point that he would now play a5. And I thought this position... So I didn't go to here because I wanted to keep my rooks connected. And I didn't go to here because I was worried that the bishop wasn't really... Yeah, wasn't doing anything there. And although it's not doing anything here either... but then after I played this move, I was worried that, look, if I play a3... then I thought this would be structurally very good for black because if he takes, let me see. So the point is, in this position, black can take here whenever he wants. So he has a choice. Can he take immediately? Let's just see. If I take immediately and I take back, now black... I think the problem here is that black is opening up this file before he's entirely ready. So if he takes my rook is coming to the open file. If he goes like this, I've now got a queen on the file, and yeah, that queen is going to get hit, and so that's also just no good. So he doesn't want to take immediately. That's certainly true. So what does he do? He could do a move like, yeah. So an interesting thing is if he does, yeah, this is quite subtle. If he does knight d7, I actually have the move b5, which is the move obviously I want to play to slide past this a pawn. Because if he takes it, I've simply got rook e to b1. And he has no piece on the board that can actually defend that pawn. He could push the pawn, but then I'm winning it back, and very nice position. So I'm actually now winning that pawn. I've got a beautiful attack. So you can't go knight b to d7. Quite a subtle reason. Knight b to d7, I can just simply push. And although I can't take back immediately, I can take back next move. Quite hard to see ideas like that. And if he tries to block this b5 push, and the way to do that is with this maneuver, knight e8 to c7. Unfortunately, that blocks the queen's protection of a5. So then the a5 pawn would be falling. So let's just show that. Knight e8. I go here wanting b5. He stops b5. I can simply take on a5. Okay, so you can say, okay, I'm going to try and win it back. And I then have this move rook b6 blocking the queen's protection of a5. Rook c7. c7, because he wants the rook to still be defending this so he can get the knight out, is the reason for that. So he develops his knight hitting the queen. I have to drop back. And in fact here black's got, although black's not doing so great, he has some rather interesting tactics. With he can take this pawn because of the long diagonal, and settle his knight into d3, takes, and then win back that pawn. So if we do a pawn count here, we've got 5 pawns against 6. So actually black's back being a pawn up. But okay, actually we're getting the pawn back. So actually it's equal, but then this pawn is now falling, isn't it? Check. Okay, so we have quite a lot of activity, and we're still a pawn down at the end of it, but white's got so much activity and a rook on the back rank that white actually has compensation for that pawn. So I was mistaken in thinking that a5 here is crushing. a5 is not quite crushing here because black's pieces are really not coordinated on the queen side for any break open on the queen side. And as I said earlier, what black really wants and what he's played for is this e5 and f5, f4 push. And you see from all these lines how he's getting a little bit distracted on the queen side, which is exactly white's plan here. Because if white does nothing, this push is going to come and completely overwhelm white's kingside. So I'm worried at this point of a5, but he just goes knight b to d7. As I said, a5 is not an issue, knight b to d7, and I go a4. And now a5 can always be met with b5, so this is good. Rook to c8. And queen to d2. At this point I'm thinking of trading off dark squared bishops. And he's thinking of his f5, f4 push. But instead of going directly to h6, I went bishop g5 first. But there's really no point in this move. So actually the best play in this position is to continue with that b5 push, open up the b file and try and make something happen on that side of the board. Bishop g5, it can just be pushed away. Bishop h6, and in fact the best move here from black, surprisingly, is just taking this. Although the queen looks very threatening on h6, there's no entry square for the queen into black's kingside. Black can completely ignore that queen and just keep on pushing with his attack. And in fact, try to exchange off queens. So even if you try and push this h-pawn, try and look very threatening, it's really completely useless. Knight e6 is coming, knight takes knight, knight takes, and these pawns are rolling. So the queen on h6 is not so dangerous. So after takes, okay, so my bishop is trapped, so I'm forced to take. He took back, and then I went knight c3. So what's my idea here? I want to push b5, obviously. Rook f7, and I get the b5 in, but in the meantime, these pawns are rolling. Rook a to b1, and this I think is a critical point in the game, because if these pawns continue their journey towards my kingside, he has a pawn majority, and the game is going to end quickly. So I knew I had to take some kind of decisive action in a way. So after he played f4, I noticed this long diagonal, and so I went for this takes, and maybe if I can pick up a rook for the knight I've lost. That was my reasoning. And the move I was afraid of, in fact, in this position was knight takes c5, which I can't take back because my queen is hanging. But that isn't, and the reasoning for that is bishop takes rook, king takes, queen here doesn't work. Queen here check doesn't work because he has this block. So this is my calculation in the game that this was really bad for me because this knight takes c5 move. Actually, it was incorrect because at the end of that line I have rook takes pawn, and the rooks are doubling with pressure on e6, and he can try and block the pin, but I can just take, and now I have, well, not there, but just pressure on this pawn, which he then, yeah, I guess he can take my pawn, I take his pawn, but my rooks are quite active. So although he's got two pieces, my rooks are quite active. So yes, he has a slight advantage, but this is actually pretty okay for white. Okay, so it's not okay, you're two knights for the rook, but you have some hope. Yeah, you have some hope. I thought I was completely lost, but it's not completely lost. But he played actually an even better move, which was knight to f6. Because after takes. But now, yeah, and this position is very good for black. But just to say, going all the way back here, it turned out there's a much better move than knight takes e4. So it's the right idea, taking on e4, making something happen. But the better move was bishop takes. So the idea here is just simply winning two pawns for the piece. As you can see, I was a bit loath to give up that bishop, so it just didn't even occur to me that that's something I'd want to do. But look at this square here. That's a juicy square for a knight. So black would have to go knight f5 to cover it. And white actually has a d5 break. Why is that? Because if So that pawn is protected by the queen. So d5. So what happens if he takes here? Any ideas? I'm gonna have to consult the oracle. If he takes, I take back. And this is apparently equal. But that's not, yeah. I guess I've got a pass pawn, so it didn't. But apparently the best move is this. And yeah, this seems, well, definitely seems interesting. So White's idea is just put all his pieces on the b file and try to infiltrate. But Black is still doing well. I mean, Black is still okay. But White has lost a piece for 2 pawns, but actually has some compensation. So if I go, yeah, Black is minus 1.3, but it's not completely lost. Well, what happened in the game instead was Knight takes pawn and bishop here, winning a rook. So winning a rook for 2 pieces. And there's no point going rook here directly. It doesn't seem to achieve anything. So I went rook b4. And in a way, this turned out to be quite a good move because it provoked an error. This knight is a key defender of this pawn. And he was tempted by that rook to just try and attack it. So actually the best move here from Black is actually just king g6, just getting the king out of the way of any lateral checks on the 7th rank. After which rook b6 hitting a6, knight to e6, a5, f3, and yeah, Black is just crushing. Worth saying that in this position, queen to a5 is obviously a huge blunder. You might think, oh, we're pinning the rook to the queen. The thing is, White has a check, winning the queen. So that's why king to g6 is a good idea, just to get the king out of those checks. Okay, so I played rook to b4, and he kind of forgot about his central pawn, which enabled me to... In this position, I was thinking, is there anything else? But no, the best there is just takes, and takes that pawn. You could have also taken with the knight or the queen, it comes the same thing. So still Black is doing okay. h6. He's doing okay because he has 2 pieces for the rook and for a rook and a pawn. And he just needs to coordinate his pieces and play a slow game, as it were. So you played f3. So it's not bad. Maybe queen to d7 first might have been also interesting. Queen to d7, queen, stopping the queen entry, and then maybe, then maybe just play it a little bit slower. But he went for f3 straight away, and this is actually quite a good move because if I take this pawn, then the queen comes to d7, and this pawn becomes a big problem. So the threat is simply queen takes pawn, the knight swinging into here, brilliant outpost for the knight because it's protected by the pawn on g5, and simply there's just a mate threat on g2, and it's all very hard to stop. And if I was to try and defend that pawn, then the knight comes in and I can't do anything. And if I try and simply push the pawn, that doesn't seem to make any difference. Takes, take back, and well, let me see. If I just take, I think it's worth saying, yeah. So if you take, this knight is now hanging, so you have to take back. You have to be a little bit patient. Rook here attacking the knight. You bring. So why wouldn't I just bring the queen in, threaten mate? Because then he could take and take this pawn with check, and my queen might be a little bit out of it. Be interesting to see if that's how bad that is actually. So apparently, apparently Black is still slightly winning with knight f5, but that's not a very pleasant position to play. So the great move in this position is to bring the knight in, so you're threatening to take here and then take here and so on. And yeah, that's a lot stronger for black. If I look at the engine again. Yeah, it's for what in fact can he do? I thought maybe worth going a little bit deeper. So if he just does a run a5, what's the threat? Because I thought the threat was taking, but you can't take immediately. So knight to h4 apparently, or queen to d5. So if knight to h4, for example, yeah, that's a really nasty threat. What can he do? So and also the problem is queen to here and here is still an issue. So queen to e3 is a potential way of defending. But then, yeah, I see, and I'm not quite sure. Like, why can't he could still do the whole sack? Takes, takes, takes. The knight's defending, so queen take the pawn. No, he could still go rook takes knight at the end of this, though. Yeah, so apparently this is his best play. So anyway, it's not so clear. But black is a piece up and should win. But okay, so the point of that is that taking this pawn is a poison pawn, and the best move is definitely not to take it and to go g3. He attacks that pawn anyway, but I can defend with the king. And here he played quite an interesting move. Oh, was it? Let me see. No, it wasn't. It was the next one. Knight f5, queen to d3. So I'm threatening to pick up this pawn. And what he should have done was apparently knight to f6, but now I need to know why. So why can't I take this pawn? Because then he can take this pawn. Okay, so it's not entirely clear at all, but it's still, yeah, still black is not winning by much. So in fact, this whole yeah, not sure. So something has gone a little bit wrong for black in terms of winning chances in this position. And here, black actually blundered and played knight to h4, trying to force something. And what we both missed is simply queen to h7 check. This rook cuts off the king, and that picks up the queen. But I was so focused on the area around my king, and I was thinking this sacrifice can't work. So just to say, queen to f6, all over. And it's not as if we didn't have time. I think we both had 5 to 10 minutes at least by this stage. It's 45 plus 45. But I was just convinced this sacrifice didn't work, and so I took it. And then he brought his other knight in. So what's better? Queen takes h3, check, king here. Really? And then knight here. So having sacrificed the knight, it's saying it wants this kind of maneuver. But this can't be good for black. So anyway, he did this, but I can just take f3 and defend this pawn. So white is suddenly really doing nicely now. Takes, takes. Queen to e3, just trying to exchange off queens, because rook against the knight should be easily winning. Queen to d7, again, not really threatening anything here. And yeah, I think it would be quite an interesting endgame also to practice this one. I mean, you're a pawn up and rook against the knight, but it's worth practicing those kinds of things. And in this position, probably the fastest way to winning is just h4 immediately, and this knight is going to hang. But I went rook g1 first, and then h4. And the point is, once I take the pawn, the knight is hanging, so the knight has to get out of the way. But then I'm taking here, and I'm going to be going to be 2 pawns up and an exchange up, and so he resigned. So that was the first game in the first week of our team's classical campaign in Lichess4545. And maybe we'll try and go a little bit faster. This was game 2 in our second game. This is our board 8. So our board 8 was Fudley, who was up against Relative Impact. And so he's up against a French defense, and he finds this pin against his opponent. So the opponent is forced to play h6, which is a kind of frustrating move because you feel like you deserve to win that piece. But then if you back off, then g5 is coming and you have to back off again, and then the knight can save itself. And it turns out the best thing in this position is something like this. The idea being that the knight can't come out anywhere because the queen covers it. And if the knight went back, then the queen is coming to g4 and things are going to get a bit unpleasant as well. So the best strategy is something like this, castles and give up a pawn. But he went for the more aggressive option of, I really deserve my piece, and I'm going to take again, which would be a nice idea, but the problem is it's opening up files on his king. Knight to e2. So an exchange of knight for bishop. And in this position, obviously, I'm slightly concerned about here, but of course he does have moves like knight to g3, which is blocking up threat, and indeed he played that. So we have opposite side castling. Okay, so he tries to hold on to his pawn, and we have both sides on the attack. So the knight comes under attack and drops back. Queen f6. And here there was a very tricky move. Okay, I'll have to try and check to make sure that sounds okay, because I'm not. Yeah, there's sound, right? Oh, there's no sound.
So, can you hear me?
Yeah, there is sound. Okay, so you guys are worrying me. Okay, so we are working. We are transmitting. Okay. So okay, as Wise One 1967 said, yeah, very nice move. Rook takes e6. And the point is that's at least winning a pawn, it's winning a huge attack, and the point being the queen can't take it. Because bishop takes pawn. Exactly. Okay, cool. So what the best move would be just backing off. And then we've got queen to e2, and yeah, we've got control of the e file and beautiful position. But that tactic is quite a tough tactic to see. Instead, white played c3. This is, as I said, the board 8 game, so can't expect that tactic to be seen. Rook takes g7, so I wouldn't say that's the critical point in the game. b3, and he's just building up an attack on the queen side. Perhaps not in the most efficient way, but nevertheless not bad at all. So any pieces in front of those pawns are going to be hit with tempo, so he's taking advantage of that. Let's do it, and pushing those pawns. Black pushes e5, takes. Knight f1, knight takes d3, queen takes d3, c6, c4. And I think this is the critical point in the game. F4. So the queen has suddenly come under a discovered attack from this bishop, and it's essential that this queen holds on to the pawn that it's protecting. And that means it must go to either this square or what other squares? It can't go to this square. It could go to this square. Yeah, so those are the only two squares it could go to hold on to that pawn. So for example, queen to b3, you hold on to the pawn, takes, and then go back. Something like this. And okay, f3 is kind of awkward, but you can defend g2 with the knight. So if you took with the pawn, knight takes, and everything's secure. And then you have, there's an idea of this, the idea of bringing the rook to the file of the king. The bishop is pinned to the queen, so you could go here. Oh yeah, this is a nice idea. The knight can never be taken because you can always go rook c1. Rook f7. Okay, so it's just very unclear who's winning this position. So that if the bishop were to drop back there, if he were to go ahead with the more obvious, just take on g2, you can actually take the bishop first and then take here. And actually, this pawn is interesting because you could take it, but actually you could also just say, a pawn near my king is a pawn that the opponent can never take. So it's actually could be a good defensive piece. And we'll see this is actually a very double-edged position. You exchange off queens so that your king is in a little bit less danger. Double your rooks, and this is actually a draw because he can just keep on checking you. If he doesn't want to keep on checking, you can exchange off rooks, and this is also a draw. So queen b3 would have been a drawing position. Queen e2 similarly. He can hit the queen, but then you can go check, and then exchange off rooks. You still want to defend your pawn, but these are just intermezzo moves. Exchange off rooks, hit the bishop, and then go back and defend your pawn. But what was played in the game, and it's kind of the end of the game in a way, is queen to d1. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm doing some Lone Wolf. Thanks for the challenge, but I'm doing some classical analysis. Although probably my viewers would much prefer me to do Crazy House. But this is a one-off classical stream. But it's a follow-on from the Zero analysis of the games of Zero. This is analysis of the games of my teammates in the first 2 weeks of Lichess4545. So queen to d1, and it loses a pawn is the problem. And then he goes queen to e2, next move, which is what he should have done last move. And then maybe the mistake is compounded by exchanging off queens, because he's a pawn down and he's exchanging. And things are getting desperate, so he has to take that bishop. It's a perfectly good move to make sure he can corral up this pawn. But now he's down a lot of material. And he's doing his best, but he's just down material. The rooks are better pieces than the rook and the knight. And he's, yeah, and he can't stop that pawn. The pawn is defended, and then queens. And he resigns. No, he doesn't resign. He fights on. He fights on to the last pawn, but then he resigns. So yeah, he fought well, but the critical point in the game was, oh yeah, I should mention, we might think here, just try and push these pawns, and maybe this is our last sort of hope to try and push the pawn, but black has this kind of trick of moving the rook with check and queening. So it's, and although that pawn is defended, if it ever moves, there's queen here check picking up the pawn, so he can now push his other pawn. So yeah, that was the second game. So after that game we were 1-1. And now let's look at the third game in week 1. And in this game, Marmot69 was black against Matrix47, and Marmot was our board 3, having overtaken Real Robert in rating just a few days before our this match. And he was up against a Scotch. So he went bishop to c5 first, bishop to e3, and queen to f6. c3, g to e7, g3, d5, bishop to g2, and takes. So actually the best move in this position, probably still in book. So no, d takes e4. Yeah, so yeah, d takes e4 is the best move, and castles is a mistake because takes if you take with the queen to defend your bishop, pawn takes pawn, hits the queen. I'm just trying to work it out. And white's got and we can't take back. Yeah, so white's just won a pawn. So it's two defenders, two attackers, so we can't take back. So if we castle, just a slight, and he. Oh, thanks Music Dan for the host. So we're analysing some Lichess 4545 games. So let's see here. Yeah, if you castle, he can take the knight, and you can't take. Oh yeah, of course, this is what it is. You can't take the bishop because then he's got this sort of intermezzo check before taking back. So I remember watching this game live, and that was a variation that sprung to mind of you might want to castle here, but because of this, after this, you can't take the bishop and then take the knight later. So you'd have to take the knight first, and then he's winning. He's picking up this pawn, which is slightly annoying. So in this position, the best move, in fact, the book move, is in fact to take back. And here normally white plays knight d2 or castles. So castles, then knight d2. So we apparently even Kasparov played this as white against Lichess4545. So the game continued. Bishop to b6, so you're dropping back the bishop, so there's no like knight takes knight or something, and then take the bishop. The bishop is now protected. White can take back that pawn. Queen needs to move. Rook to e1, just developing the rook. Rook to d8 on the file of the queen. Knight takes c6, knight takes c6. Queen has to move. Bishop to e6. So this is the theory line in this Scottish variation. There is another idea. Instead of rook to e1, knight to c5. What's this? This seems nonsense. But let's see. Bishop takes c5. Okay, I'm going to delete that. I'm not quite sure what I was talking about there. I think I just played the wrong move. Okay, so this is the theory line. Going all the way back in the here. Knight g7, g3, d5, knight bishop g2, castles. Not cut. Whoa. What have I done? It just promoted the wrong variation in a really weird way. What has it done? Yeah. So not knight takes c6. The best move is... Let's just make it really clear. Yeah, so castles. And this apparently is the theory line, but what was played in the game was knight takes c6 immediately. So not castling knight d2 and collecting this pawn. So this pawn is maybe surviving a few moves too long. Now, of course, what he must have been thinking is I'm going to pick up the bishop next. But black is lucky he can take with the queen, only move to protect the bishop. And actually, this was a very interesting game because at many points Mahmud had only one move that kept him in the game, and he kept on finding the one move, so it was very impressive. I mean, that queen takes bishop is not so impressive, but although that's also an only move. Castles. Yeah, so castles is a slight mistake because probably now is a good time just to pick up that pawn. Black might go bishop h3 and try and infiltrate, but you can just go knight d2, castles queenside, get the queen out of the line of the rook. f5, drop the bishop back. Okay, definitely need to castle because this rook is coming to the e file. Castles queenside, the rook comes to the e file. You could do a counter strike on black's queen, but okay, this is just kind of some kind of fantasy. It's a fairly equal position, but the point is you take back this pawn. Whereas what white did is he thought, oh, I can take back this pawn anytime, and Mahmud proved him wrong. There are many ways of proving him wrong. One of them would be to just play f5. So you can see how he's consolidating. He would consolidate his advantage with f5. Might go queen to b3 to stop black from castling. So you go queen to c6 to defend this pawn so you can develop this bishop. And then the knight would come out. You can then develop your bishop. So queen has to move somewhere. And actually the best way of developing the king might even not be castling, but just getting the king out. Yeah, so black's got quite a pleasant position. He's got a nice center thanks to white not taking back that pawn. So what would be another way of consolidating that pawn? Defending with the bishop is not good. So after here, yeah, defending with the bishop would not be a good way of consolidating, because then he can pile up on the pawn with his pieces, and suddenly he's got 3 pieces attacking that pawn, and he now 4 pieces, and he can break through and take it. So defending with the pawn was a good move, but Mahmut chose another move. He chose this one, e3. And of course, needless to say, moving the f-pawn would be a disaster, because now you have check, and although white can save his queen with queen to d4, he's losing his rook. So that would be an utter disaster to move the pawn. So that actually limits white's choices. If you can't move the pawn, he either has to take or play something else. So how about this? In this position, can anyone see what the best move would be? Should we take or should we do something else? I think it's. So we're going to go e3. Should we take or do something else? That's the question. Because what was played in the game was take, which maybe wasn't the best move. Okay, I'll spoil it. Queen to d4 was solid. Takes, and yeah, white gets some good play. But another way of playing is just queen to f3 as well. That might also work, but I'm trying to think, is queen to f3 any good? Queen to f3, knight here, then what? So apparently this is bearable. Knight, yeah. So you don't take, basically. Because what happened in the game is takes, and okay, the king went to h1, bishop developing. Okay, so he's trying to bring his rook to the d file. Worth saying that, yeah, this is actually very interesting. You may be thinking maybe you could just grab this pawn. But that's not very wise, because there's the threat of this, which is not just trapping the bishop, it's almost checkmate, with the only defense being a rook here, but bishop takes rook wins the queen, or queen takes bishop, and we're winning a queen for a piece, winning a queen for a piece and a rook. And what else could he do? If he does c4 to try and stop this checkmate, then we have rook to b8, bishop to a6, and rook to b6. And yeah, the bishop has no squares to go to. It's quite pretty. So you can stop the checkmate like this for a moment, but then we just pick up the bishop. Yeah, we can't. So why can't we just pick up the pawn in this situation? Is there a reason? So there is a reason. Knight to c3. Okay, so this would not be as good. and then we have to move the rook out of the way with tempo and so on. So bishop takes c4 is okay, but rook to b8 is even better. So quite a subtle reason that pushing this pawn gives a room for the knight to come out and guard this crucial, potentially almost mating square. Okay, so white didn't grab the free pawn. He saw there was danger. Went queen a4 check. c6 does a nice job then of protecting that pawn in case of any. It'd be loose at any time in the future. Just to say, probably bishop to d7 was slightly more solid. No, was it more solid or less solid? Huh. Yeah, no, less solid because of queen to b3. So yeah, very good move from Mahmoud again, because bishop to d7, queen to b3 hits both b7 and this square. And you'd have to decide what's more important, f7 or b7. So casting is a good idea, but then he might just win a few pawns. Yeah, not so good. This is just an example line, and the queen is there to defend, but maybe that's a drawing line in the end. So bishop d7 would have been a mistake, because black is a pawn up and doesn't want to draw this position, and this would have been at best a draw, or a roughly drawing position. Instead of queen d3, another idea is bishop to e6, and you lose this and try and get in on the back rank. But that yeah, knight takes f3, queen here check, queen takes knight. But again, you're just queen and rook against queen and rook, and it's again another sort of drawing position if you're trying to go for it. So after c6, knight a3, castles, queen to b4. Maybe knight to c2 was hitting the queen was a bit more accurate, but so queen to b4. Okay, he's going for this b7 pawn, and in this position, yeah, in fact I think this is the key position in this game, and I'm very naturally inclined to go bishop to d5 and exchange white's the piece that is protecting white's king. I really feel that's a really strong move to do. The bishop can't be taken because as you're taking back, hitting the queen, you've got lots of tempi and stuff. So of course the best move from white in this position would be a move like rook a to e1. Yeah, so taking is just not on. Taking, you take back, you're hitting the queen. You could even go desperado on the rook. He goes desperado on your rook. Okay, but so in this position, black would have a slight. Is only a slight edge. That's interesting. That's surprising. So we're just a pawn up, so it's not such a big deal. Oh yeah, and needless to say, queen takes b7 would be a big mistake because a rook a to b8 and then check, and we're coming in on the 7th rank. Takes, check, and we're picking up either the knight or the rook, and yeah. So bishop takes d5. Bishop to d5 feels like a really good move, but maybe it's not as. So actually, in the game, it was rejected for the following reason: takes, queen here check, and Mahmoud was scared that just rook f2 would defend everything, not realizing that the other rook would hang. But it's still, yeah, interesting. But for that reason, he decided to go for knight d5. And white took b7, so obviously this is going to be dangerous because it's encouraging the rook to the b file. Also worth saying here, yeah, you can't do a counterattack on the black queen. Why not? Because we can just go Desperado, isn't it? In fact, sorry, it's not go Desperado. If you go Desperado, he'll go Desperado on you. So you have to take first. Then when he takes, you can take back. And then, oh, that's what it is. You lose your rook, but then you win another rook at the end of the line. Yeah. So rather subtle. Yeah, takes, 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 takes. So you have to analyze these taking sequences all the way to the end, and you find you're a piece up. So that's why rook a to e1 wouldn't be possible. So when you hit the queen has to move somewhere. It could have gone here. The move he chose, the move that Matrix 47 chose was queen a6. And then black played the very natural rook takes b2. And there's a very tempting move for white here, which is knight to c4. It looks like a fork of the queen and the rook. Actually, the best move in this position is rook a to e1, hitting the queen, and things are not so clear. So we're hitting the knight, so he takes. So what's the idea here again? Oh yes, he wants to take here because if you take back, your queen takes, check, and then you're picking up this piece. So it's some serious business going on. So you can't take it. So what you do is you do a counter strike, which obviously the king can't take back, or why not? If the king takes back, then we take, and oh yeah, the bishop was the one hitting our knight. So the threat was queen takes and take our knight. So we have to do a counter strike on that bishop and then take back. Yeah, these Crazy House challenges are so tempting, but unfortunately I'm in the middle of a classical stream. Otherwise I'd love to play you Crazy House, because Crazy House is my thing. But queen takes pawn check, king here. Okay, so this position, queen knight rook against queen knight and rook. We seem to be a pawn down though somehow. Okay, we get the pawn back, but okay, we're gonna get perpetualed. So this would be a drawing position in the end. So after queen a6, got to be careful with okay. So what white actually played was knight to c4. So what we're saying, he should have played rook a to e1, and that would have actually been drawing. But he played knight to c4, which looks very tempting. It's actually quite interesting how a lot of games are lost with failed tactics. So whenever you have a tactic, you have to try and really make sure it works, because when the opponent is put in this predicament, oh my gosh, what have I done? I'm about to lose a piece. They're forced sometimes to find the only move that rescues them. And in this case, there's a counter idea. Although we're forked, we get a counter pin. I say only move, but couldn't the queen also go here? Well, there's a reason why it can't. Yeah, so if it goes here, I think it can. I can't remember why. Queen d3. So queen d3 could work. I'm trying to work out what. Yeah, queen d3 also apparently is quite good, but it's not as good apparently. But I can't remember why. Queen takes, bishop takes. Oh, yeah, he goes desperado on your rook and then takes your rook. Okay, that's why. So what happened in the game was again losing this, but taking this. But yeah, this is interesting. Because we want to take this knight, but if we take this knight, we lose our knight. And so then it'll be queen and bishop against two rooks and a bishop. So it's not clear that this is good for black. Yes, I'm sorry I won't be able to play you internet chess killer. But yeah, Crazy House definitely is something yeah, send me correspondence challenges in Crazy House and I'll definitely take them up. So yeah, so what happened in the game? So the problem is this knight is now pinned, so if it were to take the rook, you're losing the queen, and there's no real way of defending this knight. So he had to sack his queen for the rook, and he's hoping that he's actually getting another piece. So for rook and a piece, but he's getting another piece at the end of it. But here Marmot found the only way of defending this piece, of course, threatened mate in one. That's a pretty good way of defending it, right? So threatening queen takes g2. So white defended the mate with the counter threat. And I guess when we were watching the game, queen takes knight looked rather nerve-wracking because of rook a to b1 and the rook coming here with the black king on the back rank. So queen to c2, rook to b8. What I didn't really see at that point was how the queen could do this kind of maneuver and therefore protect the bishop. But because of the worry about this, that's why he didn't take the knight himself. And in fact, as spectators, we also saw an alternative move in this position, which is to pin the bishop. So it can't take the queen because the bishop is pinned to the king. So it's forced to take the bishop, but now we can take the rook for that bishop. The bishop came back to g2. Probably the best move in this position was just going king to g1 and losing that knight and playing this position. Bishop to g2 loses very quickly because of knight to e3. Again, threatening mate on g2. The bishop can move, and now a very cunning move because, in fact, if the queen had taken this knight, rook to b1, and this is a checkmate threat on the back rank. And unlike before, where it was go here and come back and defend the piece on the back rank, now there's no piece on the back rank defending the mate. So in fact, the only move would be to take, and I'm not even sure why black has any advantage in this position. Trying to think. So, I mean, the computer reckons that there's a slight advantage. Maybe it's only because there's a hanging pawn. Oh, Joanna, I want to play, but hi there, Yalao. Yeah, we're going very slowly looking at these classical games. Yes, so Joanna, I want to play, but unfortunately I can't because I'm doing classical analysis. And Leo5880 says, for some reason the chat on my phone wasn't working. Wonder if others are having the same issue. It's just been very quiet, Leo, don't worry. Classical chess doesn't excite people in the same way as Blitz, and also strong grandmasters, obviously, commentating. So this is a really dangerous trick. Queen takes knight fell in for this back rank mate idea. But Marmot again, and for the final time in the game, found the only move. The knockout move, which was knight g4, threatening queen takes h2 check and queen f2 checkmate. So that was the third game in week 1. And so at this point we'd just taken the lead 2 games to 1. So we've seen my game, the game of Fudley, and the game of Marmot. So game 4 was between Real Robert against Kajo M. So really very high rated board 4 Kajo M on 1892, but on board 4 of his team. So this was a really strong team we were up against. And in this game we have a Roy Lopez. It's been a while since I saw this game, so I'm just trying to remember. Okay, so c3 was played, and this was maybe less common than, say, rook e1. Oh yes, I remember this game. And this kind of setup. So this would be more classical way of playing it. So c3 is slightly delayed. So this is a game between Kramnik and Michael Adams. It was a draw, so it's a grandmaster draw. You can kind of see the setup. Okay, the c3 was played first, and so Kudra M thought, there must be something wrong with it. So he went into a bit of a think, and he played b5. So maybe the slight disadvantage of c3 is you could take this pawn. So that's usually a bad idea because white gets a lot of activity down the open file. Knight to c5 is going to take on this one. Knight takes here. No, what am I talking about? You're threatening to take there, but we want to take here first and then take here. Okay, so this could be, for example, I'm not. This could be example a line. Okay, so black gets apparently a slight edge. But okay, b5 was played. It seems perfectly reasonable. The bishop drops back to c2, and black castled. d5 is also playable in this position. d5, d4, and bishop to g4. But he castled d4 and d6. Okay, so white's got a nice center, but obviously this bishop is threatening to come out to g4. So white played actually quite a nice move, h3. It's a move on the flank, but it's actually the intention is to protect your center. So the bishop decides it's not really got any life here. Here it would get forked. Here it's not really got any life, so it goes on to the long diagonal. So again, it's all about the center in the opening, putting pressure on the center. Rook to e1, defending the center. Knight to d7, and white needs to develop some pieces. So knight b to d2. And so maybe a decent move from black is takes, and putting pressure on the center like this. This could have been like so. But instead, black chose for a different option, g6, which was interesting, and probably with the idea of, at some point, moving the bishop into the fianchetto on g7, maybe at some point to go f5. So white's just moved the knight to f1 just to clear away this diagonal, and obviously this is now a very interesting diagonal for the bishop. Bishop to f6, and he just drops his bishop in on h6. Another idea is also just this knight actually doesn't have that many squares to go to. We could just block off this diagonal. It's a very tempting thing to do, is just to block off that diagonal. And if you takes, the knight is still protected by the rook. So that would have been another tempting way to play it. But he went straight for the h6, bishop g7. He could have taken this bishop, king takes, but he decided to defend with the queen first. Knight to e7, and now played quite an interesting move, knight 1 to h2. Maybe rook a to d1 also was strong, just, again, pressure on the center. Okay, king to h8 is apparently a decent move, but it felt like it was wasting time because at some point white wants to take on g7 anyway. And white's intentions became clear after this move. His intention is to put his queen on h6 and bring this knight to g5 and mate the black king on h7. But unfortunately, black's got a very good defense, which is just knight g8, and that just almost kills everything. This is such a great plan, this queen h6, knight g5, because there's almost no defense. If knight f6, knight takes knight, h7 is almost unprotectable. But knight g8 just stops everything in its tracks. And one wonders whether white really has an attack anymore after such a move. So white focused his attention back to the center with rook ad1. Great move. And now black made probably the big mistake of the match, which is playing f5. In a sense, black has lost the bishop defending his king. He has a measure of safety thanks to the knight defending the key dark squares. By playing f5, it's just opening up. It's opening up the center. But actually, something worse. It's weakening the e6 square, and that's the key. In fact, this is actually the problem with f5. But it wasn't noticed immediately, so Robert took the pawn, takes back, and in this position, probably he realized if I just move my knight back to h2, which, or to, if I move here, then this is coming, and then this knight doesn't have that many great squares to go to. So there's a certain lack of harmony, a lack of coordination between the knights. And let me just see, is there anything? I mean, if you just did a move like this presumably comes. Knight g5. Yeah, so the knights are kind of lacking. So it's not losing by any stretch of the imagination. Oh, knight g5 still comes, I guess is the point. But the brilliant move is just to go knight g5 straight away. So we're going to try and settle in on e6. And there are several moves for black, and I would say that king h8 might be one of the best. And knight e6, okay, wins an exchange in this position. Okay, we lose that knight, but we then take this pawn, opening up a file on the queen. So I'm not saying this is the best variation, but this is actually quite an easy to calculate variation. So if black had gone king h8, so we come in here, take the rook. We don't try and save the knight. We go instead for this couple of pawns here because we actually can land a rook in here. And although we're losing our rook for a piece, we're winning a second piece for it. So we get a position like this, check, and here. Okay, so we'd be 2 pawns up, and this is obviously completely winning for white. But black played a worse move than king h8. He played queen to e7. And it's worse because, as we'll see, he can just ignore the fact that this can take the knight, and he's just going to go straight for the attack. Takes. So just to say, if you do take here, you can just take this pawn is the problem, attacking the queen. Another move we were thinking of during the game is queen to d3, maybe with a checkmate, mate in one threat on h7. But that's not quite as strong because of king h8, and the queen provides some lateral cover, although it's probably quite strong, just not quite as strong. Knight to e6, yeah, it's still completely winning. But even better is just to take here and then to take on h7, hitting. Remember, the knight's protected by the bishop, hitting the queen and the rook. Then take the rook. Oof, take the hair there. He gets an exchange of queens, but okay, we're gonna be promoting basically. So yeah, this is all very strong. But what happened in the game? Yeah, so he didn't take the knight. He played knight. Kadra played knight takes e5, which was much stronger. But it does lose a piece. Takes. And now he played actually a very interesting move. Stockfish would say it's a mistake. Stockfish would say he should have taken this pawn. Queen to d7. The idea is takes, check, and we're going to take this pawn at the end of it, is it? So black blocks off that diagonal, but then check, exchange queens, and win an exchange here. So you get something like this. Where at the end of it, we're an exchange up. So yeah, so d takes e5 apparently was slightly stronger, but he played actually a very interesting move, which is g3. Takes on d6, hitting the queen. Takes back knight. Okay, and then again we're threatening to win the exchange, but we're going for even more. Going for the checkmate on g7. Queen to b6 check. Okay, so this is actually really tricky. So Keijo had this queen here check, and first thought might be, okay, we'll just tuck our king away into the corner. But you calculate the line and it just doesn't work, because the queen comes in on these squares and it's checkmate. So that's worrying. So actually we can't go to f1 either because the rook's cutting it off. So we must block this check. So that's why g3 was actually quite a subtle move in a way. So we have to block the check. And now what's the problem? The problem is queen to g7 checkmate. So black defended against checkmate, but now white has queen e5 check. I think during the game when we were watching, we're thinking about bishop takes h7 sacks being an idea. And another idea is just queen h5 threatening bishop takes h7 sacks. So the idea of bishop takes h7 sacks are that if the rook took back, we have queen e5 check. Obviously the rook can't block because queen takes rook would be checkmate, so black has to give up the piece to start with. And then there's rook e5, and we can't stop that mate. So you can't take with the rook, that's the first thing. So what about taking with the king? Okay, but then we can, oof, what happened? So we block here. We were considering the bishop takes h7 sack. What if he takes with the king? But then we have queen h5 check, and the king is mated if it didn't have a blocker. Hi there, king switcher. Knight h6. Okay, but now we have knight g5 check, hitting the rook. We're doing some classical standard chess. King g8. And now we have rook to e6, hitting the knight and the queen. So we're really crushing through. c6 might defend, but then we have queen to g6 check. King goes here, queen takes knight check, rook blocks, queen here check, rook here, queen here, and checkmate. So it was mate either. There is a long mating sequence. However, you take back that bishop. So you basically can't take it back, so it's a real problem. So bishop takes h7, queen h5, both very strong. This also, queen e5 check, will also work eventually. Rook f6, knight here, so threats on h7. So just worth mentioning, rook f1 might be tempting to try and put pressure on this pin. If black had blocked with the knight, then we can indeed go rook here and put pressure on the pin. But here, actually, rook f1 would be a huge blunder because black would have queen takes defending the pinned piece. So even though it's pinned, it can still defend. Queen takes, rook takes. It can take back after the pin is dissolved. So rook f1 was a huge mistake. Knight c5 was actually apparently a very nice move, just blocking off the pin, and then we can do whatever. Then we can do something. Bishop. I keep on losing it. Knight c5. If bishop to c6, rook here, and just trying to go rook takes h7 checkmate, for example, would be very strong. What's the reason for this? Again. Oh, I see, because we're trying to stop knight takes bishop. We're trying to stop just losing a whole bishop. Because knight takes bishop, queen takes, and then rook f1 would be a threat, for example. And without that bishop, there aren't mate on g2 ideas. Okay, so he tries to save the bishop, but then there's this. So it's very strong. So this rook is liberated thanks to this knight. Okay, but he went a different route in the game. He went with this knight. The queen was under attack. This didn't work at all. So rook e8 was just hung the rook. And rook f2 is again not ideal because now there's no longer a pin of the rook here. So this rook was now free to check. And worth noting that if the king runs here, there's checkmate, because queen e5 check, king takes f7, and we were calculating all kinds of mates in this position. For example, queen here check, the rook and king here and queen here would be checkmate. But there's a much faster checkmate, which is after queen takes knight, just queen here is checkmate. So the king can't run out and it can't run back, so the queen must block, takes. And yeah, this should still be winning, but what if, is there any nasty ideas with the perpetual on the 7th rank? There's still a little concern, and rook e2 kills all concerns of that. Rook takes knight, and the move that killed the game was this bishop finally coming onto b3, onto this diagonal. If the rook moves, queen takes knight check is coming. If the rook doesn't move, queen takes rook is coming. And I think this final move emphasized the mistake that black made in pushing f5, because it opened up his like squares. We saw e6 being a problem, and just final move just brought the bishop onto this long diagonal, onto this light square diagonal, which became very weak because of f5. So it was a very beautiful game from Réal Robert. And I think I'm going to be running out of steam, so I won't be able to cover. My original intention in this stream was to cover the first 2 weeks, but maybe I'll I don't know. We'll see. I think we'll see what we do. So the next game was Speed Cobra, who was our board 1 in week 1 against Finn33. And so by this point we were 3 games to 1 up. So worth saying here, queen takes b2, so Finn had set Speed Cobra, a little trap here. This would be one of those GM draws. You go for this. So the knight is protected by the bishop. How to defend? So we don't want to defend with the king because the knight would still come here and pick up the rook. So the only defense is using the knight. But then you attack the queen, and you let the queen take the pawns, and it can't escape. And there's nothing else Black could have done. Black could do. The moment Black takes this pawn, he's stuck in a draw. This is a game between Kamsky and Ivanchuk, for example, from 2014. So Speed Cobra didn't fall into that little draw. Instead, taking the pawn, takes back, and d6. So therefore, there's no covering this the weak c7 square. Apparently even stronger than d6 is knight d5, again covering the c7 square, but also hitting the bishop. So the bishop would have to drop back, queen b4 check, and there's this very interesting. Sorry, if you defend with the pawn, you can actually sack the knight here. Pawn takes knight, queen takes, and you're hitting both the knight, and if you defend with the queen, you're hitting the rook as well. But then white has a scary move, queen to d2. But you can just drop back and you've just stolen the pawn. And then play d6. So black would have a slight edge. So that's if he defends with the pawn. And if he defends with the queen, then there's queen takes b2, hitting both the rook and the knight. So that would be really annoying. Now actually white has a move protecting both the queen and the knight, but then you can go queen to c3 back again. And now the queen can't go back to block, because otherwise the rook would fall. So king would have to move either to here or to here, but this pawn is falling. check, and block, for example. So yeah, black would be very comfortable in this position. So actually, in this position, after knight here, okay, that probably the pawn c3 is best after the check, but probably actually the best move from white might even be just to bring the bishop all the way back, and this sort of position might arise, which is again fairly equal. Okay, but instead of going knight to d5, Speedcover went for d6. Knight c4 hitting the queen, bishop d3, e6. So he's trying to defend both the light squares and the dark squares with this, what's often called in Crazy House the wolf type setup. Bishop to e7, castles, h3. Okay, he needs to get his bishop out somehow. c3, queen c7. And I was actually just thinking, it's really, I was thinking that in this position, what are the, like, we have a kind of, both sides have got most of their pieces out. Okay, black still hasn't got his knight out. But there's then the question of where should black take his knight out. And I was actually just sort of thinking in this position, how should both sides play this position? And I was saying, well, obviously white's got a big space advantage. So if black can trade off some pairs of minors, either some bishops or some knights, that's going to be in black's interest because he's got less space to fit all his pieces. So how would he go about doing that? So what was I thinking? I was thinking that if the knight went here ever, blocking off the rook file, then this square would become available for the bishop to come in here and maybe do a trade of bishops. So that's one idea. A slightly more creative idea is that if this knight were to ever move off, then at some point we could go g6, knight h5, hitting that bishop, which would then have to back off, or back off to here, that's fine. And I'm still trying to think, what was I thinking? Oh, yeah, if it backs off, that's interesting. So if the knight backs off to here and the bishop backs off to here, so let's draw that again. So we could go g6, knight here. The bishop backs off to h2, as is usual. That actually opens up this diagonal for our bishop to come in. And with the knight on h5, we could even drop it in on f4 to try and challenge the diagonal of this bishop. So this might seem like a completely crazy maneuver, but it's the kind of thing and then it would then encourage a move like g3, which is not in white's interest, blocking in his own bishop. But it's the kind of sort of thing we might be considering doing. Okay. Also, in terms of ideas, we really want to push this, actually this pawn at some point, but we have a sort of slight annoyance. We can never push this pawn because of the pin on the queen. We want to eventually get in e5 to challenge the center. We don't want d5 as much because that would block in our bishop, although it may be good, but also we don't want it just because it opens up this bishop on our queen for now. So just trying to contemplate some of the ideas of both sides. So black really wants to trade off stuff, trade off minors, and then his position will be a lot more comfortable, and then get in the e5 break. So that would be some of the plans for both sides in this position. Okay, so white went queen to e2, black went knight b to d7, knight c to d2, and rook f to e8. Rook a to d1, so both sides just consolidating. Knight f8, okay, that's nice. Because the rook's moved, we can see it's going to head to here, provide some coverage of the black king. Bishop to b5, so that's it. So you went rook e to d8, and I'm just wondering, maybe is this a good move? Because as I said, we want to trade off these minors, so why not bishop to c6? So I imagine I'm missing something, which is why it's not a good move. So what am I missing? If I go bishop to c6? So what I'm slightly missing is white has queen to c4 here. So I knew there must be something. So rook to c8. Yeah, so apparently this is, it's not awful, but maybe it's our slightly better bishop. But no, okay, this is, I mean, we can see here, look, it's fairly even, you know, plus 0.1. And in the position before we played bishop to c6, it was again 0.0. So it shows that the plan of swapping off minors, it's not too bad. Having said that, this is probably our best piece. So we can see why we're going to be hesitant. But obviously this is also white's best bishop as well. Well, yeah, both white's bishops are rather decent. So yeah, maybe this bishop is more annoying right now. But it's the piece that could potentially threaten our king one day. Okay, so he went rook e to d8 in any case. Knight to g5, knight to d5, and queen to g4. Queen to h5 with the mate and one threat might have been slightly stronger because it forces bishop takes g5. Sorry, it's not mate and one threat because the knight's defending. Eek. But it is threatening this. Bishop f6 might be another way of trying to defend, but let's see. H2, H6. So I'm not quite sure. It's another way of defending. So okay, so if queen to h5, you might take the knight. After all, we want to exchange, so why not? And then f6. So the knight was threatening. The knight and the queen are both threatening this square. So just take off the knight is a good way of defending. Try and exchange off queen is a good way of getting safe. So something a position like this. Okay, but queen to g4 was a slight mistake apparently, because you can go h6, knight g to f3, g5. I don't see it, but okay. But okay, so black defended by playing knight to g6, just obviously trying to give his king some coverage. Bishop dropped back to g3, knight to f6. Okay, so black seems to be coordinating the pieces around his king fairly nicely, although Stockfish is complaining left, right, and centre, saying that it's not doing it as well as he should. But okay, this feels very good. Knight d to e4 takes. And a6 chasing away that bishop, queen to c6. So if we could ever chase away this knight, we have ideas obviously on g2. So f3, better safe than sorry, I guess. And in this position, black played b5. And again, yeah, I'm not sure. Stockfish prefers h6, but it doesn't. It's not occurring to me, especially why this is stronger or less strong. So let's get on to the more critical part of the game. H4, bishop e7. Yeah, this is the critical point in the game, or one of the critical points in the game. And white played a very interesting move. Knight takes h7, and you can't take this because whoa. Knight takes h7. Okay, if we were to take this, what would happen to us? So the idea, I think, is to take here and no, something's wrong. So why can't we just take this knight? We can't take this knight because... Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. There's a pin the knight would get pinned. So we're losing the piece again, and our king side is getting wrecked. So that would be very bad. Yeah, I remember this during the game, so just not remembering it now because that. So in fact, do I have the line? Knight takes h4. Oh. Yeah, so this is what happened in the game. He took here. But there's actually a much stronger move for white in this position, involving the e6 square. And that was knight takes f7. The point being, if you take the knight, queen takes e6 comes. King f8 is only move. Then h5 comes. If you move this knight, say, knight to h8, there's bishop takes h7 with a mate threat on g8. Oh my gosh. So you try and stop the mate threat with queen d5, maybe. Okay, maybe that actually works to stop the mate threat. So you don't take. Instead, maybe you go. Let's see what you do. Oh, so it's not completely crashing. Yeah. So you go here. If knight to a8, queen to f5, check. Knight to f7, queen takes f7, h7. So it's not sort of instantly losing, but it's just very unpleasant for black to play. Bishop to f6, bishop to g6, and so on. And if black tries to attack the queen, bishop to c8, queen can just back off. So the same kind of issues. d5 takes the knight. Okay, so he wins the knight back, but blocks off the diagonal. So that's if you take the knight. And what if you don't take the knight? What if you try and block off the diagonal immediately? So block off the file, e5. d5. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what was wrong with this. d5, why can't... Okay, so we can't take because otherwise bishop takes knight has a discovered attack on the queen. So we have to move out the way. We hit the queen again. And then we takes, and then we come back. Okay, so it's just more a comfortable position. Huh. That's not right. Yeah, so a comfortable position for white, but it's only +1. Okay, so it was a very interesting sack anyway. But he went for knight takes h7, and black countersacked on h4. And both sides played actually really incredibly well, so I'm just going to wind through. So grabbed a pawn there, doubled the rooks on the file, queen to d5, rook takes, doubled again on the file, put the rook on the g file, again looks very decent. I can't see a problem with that, although Stockfish might disagree. And so yeah, lined up his pieces on the G file, but doesn't want to exchange queens because he wants to get some kind of attack going. In the meantime, the bishop's always defending against his own back rank, and also he has luft on h7. Okay, rook to g3, c4, and what should he have done here? So apparently he had an idea of going queen to h7, maybe with ideas of this, which could be blocked, but then put the queen behind. Yeah, that doesn't really, it's just an idea. So b takes c4, b takes c4, queen to h4. So neither side making real progress yet. Queen to h6. So that idea I just showed would have been a way for black to maybe get a draw, because actually it's starting to look quite precarious with these passed pawns. But queen to b2 apparently was a better move. Yeah, but so c5 was a mistake. Why is c5 a mistake? Because sorry, it's been a while since I looked at this game. I'm trying to remember how this. c5, bishop h3. Yeah, now everything is crumbling around the white king. So how is white to stop that again? F's. Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. Queen to b2. So if I did something like this now, queen to b8, king here, queen to b1 check, and if I block, why can't I take it? I can't take it because then I'd hit the queen. So if you were to take it, oh yeah, the bishop's protecting it. Okay, I'm getting really sleepy now. But white has got one move, rook to e2. Okay. So why does rook to e2 not work in this position? After c5, oh, I see the queen's in the wrong place. You need to put the rook in front of the queen, so this is a real problem. So yeah, the move here was not c5, it was getting the queen better positioned so you could put the rook in front of the queen. It's quite important, rook in front of queen. Okay, so he played c5 and then things kind of came crashing down. Bishop here, so he lost bishop for 2 pieces, but now he's threatening a mate here and here. Queen here check, and he's promoting. And, well, he's not promoting, he's just going to take the rook. And that was game over. So yeah, I'm sorry this game wasn't analysed as nicely as the others. Yeah. But anyway, so after... okay, I'll just give a quick sort of wrap up. So this was the results of week 1 against Mother of Dragons. We were 4-1 up then after that 4th game, having won on board 1 and board 2 and board 3 and board 4. And then we lost on boards 5, 6, 7 and then 8 we'd already lost earlier. So we ended up the week 4-all, and we were paired against endgame spoilers led by Isa Valpes, who had also drawn their first week 4-all. And it was a very tense match, and we were actually down by 3.5 points to 2.5. 3.5 points to 1. To 1.5. Yeah, 3.5 points to 1.5. And then we won our last 3 games to win. Yeah, to win that week. And maybe I don't know if I should play through some of these games. So this was last week. My Son Never Call Me won his match. I kind of saying d4 is probably slightly stronger than d3, but knight g to e7, bishop f4, queen b6, drops bishop back. There's a crazy tactic here of instead going knight to c4, hitting the queen, and going knight there check, and then taking the knight back, and you have a very strong attacking position. And if black takes the knight, then you just take the queen, so you get a queen for 2 pieces. But that's very hard to see. So after knight takes knight, knight takes knight, knight c6. And probably, yeah, a really nice move in this game from My Son Never Call Me, sneaking his bishop into d6. Very nice move. And black's left with only one move to defend this pawn, otherwise he's losing a pawn, bishop f8. And the problem with that move is he's losing his dark squared bishop. And the problem with that is that means the queen can invade on dark squares. which is why actually Stockfish prefers king takes, just so the king can, I've got some really detailed analysis, but just so the king can thwart the queen's entry. But okay, rook takes, queen to c1. So in this position, maybe e5 first was a good idea, to prevent d6 and to just, so it cements the control over the dark squares, and then you do queen c1 next. Having said that, black would for sure dissolve that piece, but the problem is then his king has no safety, and he's opening up the position in a way that he's not very safe. So you could either, you'd have two choices, either go and grab a pawn directly, or try and blow up the center and go for a direct attack. So with something like rook f to e1, trying to blow up the center, putting our rooks on these half-open files. But okay, he went for queen c1 first, and black went f6, probably d6. Anyway, he went for f6. No, there is a reason for f6. It's because, yeah, after queen here, rook here, queen will invade. So it was actually very important to stop that. So you can go f6, rook f7. So that was actually a very smart move to go f6. And d4. So it was very interesting because when I was watching the game, I was thinking the idea was to go e5 and control the dark squares. But my son never called me came up with an alternative plan, which is also very nice, which is to go d4 and just blow open the center. And that's what he did, going d4, d5. And he blows open the center, although here, queen h6 is easily parried. So the best move was actually f4. But okay, he went here. Then f4, knight to g4, queen going back to h4. So black was offering a trade of queens. He wisely declined because the black king is less safe, so he went back. And he's putting his queen on the file of this king. King to f8 seems reasonable. And here, I would always play e5 with the idea of at some point putting my knight in on d6 and just cementing these weaknesses on the dark squares. So now white's got a very pleasant game in this position. Queen to here because just we need to defend this square. So black is trying to stop this knight maneuver. So we just bring our queen in, and now the bishop's trying to stop it. Okay, so we bring our queen into this square. Can he wants to trade of queens? No, no trade of queens. We attack the rook. Okay, we can actually. So at this point, we're not clear that we have no material advantage, but it's just a dominant position though, and we can then get that pawn, and now we have a protected pass pawn. And convert this position. But okay, he went instead for the trade, and that proved a little bit. Yeah, the black king could get some safety, and it turned out the tactics. He lost a little bit of harmony in his own position, especially with this move, knight c6. Now the knights aren't working together in the way that they once were. And probably the best. This knight is actually in white's half, the one piece in white's half. Probably the best move is to chase it out, and then. But he did this, and now this knight is sort of hanging. So he threatens mate in one. That's nice. But the mate is defended, and actually the best way of defending it was just to slide the king over, because the king is safer on g8 than on f8 anyway. But instead black went here, again offering the queen trade. So checks, the king went to safety. And now we have a problem, because the knight is attacked twice but only defended once. And now it's really critical. We enter a very chaotic position because we need to get this knight out. But then the problem is the knight can hit the rook with tempo, and so we could get some kind of exchange of rooks. So where the black hits takes this rook, knight takes this rook. And we're forced into this chaotic kind of position because we lost stability in our position with this knight c6 move. But instead he played this, which would be fine to win back the bishop, were it not for this move here, and followed by this, and this is quite a dire threat. Do this, we just takes this. Queen here check, takes here, queen here check, rook here, take the knight, takes rook h3 check, but then we just take it. Okay, so if you go queen c3, so queen h4 is causing a lot of trouble for black, and the black king on h6 is actually very safe. But black missed queen h4 and instead went back to d8, and so knight takes bishop. Queen there hitting the rook, queen check. So white's pieces are beginning to find some kind of harmony again. But okay, knight e4. Yeah, so knight e4 was a mistake. Rook d7 apparently was better. Okay, knight e4, hitting the queen. So the reason it was a mistake is sort of very simple. Just simply take the knight. And you can't take back because of knight here. No. Something's wrong. Knight here, check. Oh yeah, so it's double check. So it's double check, so we're picking up the queen. So you can't block with the queen because it's a double check. So you can't take that knight. So the best you can do is just get the king out of the way, and then the rook survives. So we just picked up a free piece, and we're doing very nicely. So that was a critical. Yeah, rook takes knight. It's a free piece, but that was missed in the game. But this was not missed, and this was a nice tactic, picking up a pawn. And the idea is if you take the rook, this comes, and then we pick up the queen, and white's winning. But actually black had some very nice moves in this position. After rook takes pawn, he could have simply just gone rook to d8, hitting the knight. And you can defend the knight, and again, there's the threat of pawn takes rook, knight takes. You don't want to move the knight, because you need the knight for knight takes f5. King backs off, rook back, and actually black could have then won the pawn back. So yeah. But instead what happened in the game is things got... He moved the rook back, and he just won that pawn, and he started pushing that pawn. And in this position, black resigned. Okay, so let's just end with the discussion of this position. It should be quite fun. So in this position, black resigned. But you shouldn't really resign so early. Indeed, white does have a crushing move. In fact, I think it was in this position, black resigned. White does indeed have a crushing move after king g8 or king h8. It's not so easy to find, but I think Kia would have found it. And the crushing move was knight here, hitting the queen. The point is if you take this knight, queen is simply coming in here, check, and checkmate. Oh, worth saying, if the king goes here, is there something more decisive? Yeah, you could just push e7. So that's much more decisive. So that's why king g8 is necessary, and knight f5. Okay, so this knight can't be taken. But black actually has other moves. And the nicest move he has is queen here check, king here, queen here check, guarding this square. Now, if we're just going to go back, we're going to get a repetition. Actually, what if we just go here? Then there's queen to b1 check. And you've got to be careful, because if you were to do this, black would suddenly be winning. Because he's just winning the knight which you just hung. But if you go to here, okay, there's knight to e4 check, stopping you from going to b3. So you'd have to go here, and then pawn takes knight, defending this knight. Interesting. So okay, so this would be very double-edged. But okay, after this move, queen to c2, white does have a way of winning. And it's not to hang around on the first two ranks, it's to take a run for it and run to the third rank. And black has one more check, and this move is then critical. If you run to here, then black can just take this knight, and you can try and go for any checkmate, but then he has checks on you. A1. If you keep on running up and down, you're going to get checked with knight h1, f2. If you run up, then the queen comes in. Queen comes in with check, check, check. And black could even go for queen takes h6 check, king takes h6. Maybe black's going for a win. But that doesn't work, because white does have this passed pawn. And if you try and stop this passed pawn, white now has some checks. And so white can now force a perpetual. And if black is wise and doesn't block off the king, leaves that square for the king, then white has this check, and suddenly it's white who's winning again. So going all the way back to this position, putting the king on h3 is actually a fatal mistake. But if you put your king on h4, then after pawn takes knight, queen here, black has one check, and then you go to h3. And now the queen covers the only remaining check. So that would be completely winning for white. But that whole sequence, which I think was quite interesting, so the sequence of check, check, must go to h4, while both sides were in time trouble, that was missed in the game because black gave up hope and resigned, perhaps a little too early. And I've got also some analysis of Assassin in White against Lichess4545, but I guess I'm just going to play through it quickly, and those who are reading the chat can read the chat. So the Assassin had three ideas in this position. He went in the end for knight c3. Lichess4545 had three thoughts of what to do in response. Went in the end for a fourth one, which wasn't one of his original plans, and probably destabilized his position a bit. So white's got some ideas for maneuvering his knight, but went for this sort of idea, exchanging off bishops. Now the problem with this, it was a good move, but the problem is white's, as we saw in the very first game, white's always going to have play down the a file against this pawn, and can just double up everything along that file. There's a question of whether knight d5 was better in this position, but white went for the trade, and so yeah, white is a pawn up now. And in this position, instead of rook b2, which is a very natural move, yeah, black had a very tricky move, which is c4. So actually, this whole position, sort of philosophically, if we go from the beginning again, it was all about controlling the center. You know, you're bringing out your pieces, controlling the center. Okay, there is this a pawn push, but it's all about the center. And then it's suddenly we're focusing on the flank, and we're winning this pawn on the flank. And now black, okay, he gives up the pawn for activity, but the key move here is now to break in the center, c4. And so what's the idea of this move? If white just ignores this, then black has knight f6 hitting this pawn, and if you defend the pawn, d5. So we can't hang around here or this is going to get taken. We have no piece that can really defend it, so we have to push. But then we have knight h5. Ooh. And suddenly it seems like, okay, are we losing a piece here? We could throw in some checks. We could... but okay, so it seems like we've got to take this, but then take this. And the problem then is this bishop is then munching up all our pawns. So it's a rather precarious, or looks like it will. Rook a3, rook c1. It's a kind of rather precarious situation that suddenly we find ourselves in. So that's if we dodged the take. But what if we just took it? If we take it, we lose our nice pawn structure, and so black will certainly take back. Yeah, this pin is a little bit annoying. So what happened? I mean, it's saying king g3. I mean, knight takes c4. So apparently white has still got an edge, but his pawns are very... Knight takes bishop, pawn takes. His pawns are not ideally placed. And as long as there are rooks on the board as well, I find it hard. Well, with rooks on or rooks off, I find it hard to believe white can win such a position. But that was quite a hard move to find c4. Rook b2 is very natural, hitting this bishop. So bishop e3 was played. Knight b8, rook takes d6, rook takes f2. So, okay, at this point, Issa kind of went all in. And going all in is something very natural that we do against stronger players. He saw this bishop b3 idea existed in the position, but he still went all in the hopes that he could make something happen. So it's a minor versus minor endgame, a pawn down. C takes d4, c takes d4. And just worth saying, just one other point in this game. Assassin brought his king in, but actually the strongest move in this position is just to go e5 first and then bring your king in. Because now this bishop cuts off the black king from going this way, and I should have put as a variation, black can never go this, f6, because otherwise we simply push and queen. So the black king has to come this way, and the white king kind of can shoulder the black king. And we get this kind of position where this pawn is getting lost. Now that's a tricky move. Why can't we just take this pawn? Knight d5 check. Oh, we can take it, but he's taking this pawn. Okay. So we just bring our king in, for example, like so. Would be one example. Or if he goes knight a4 hitting this, we just bring our king in. Okay. But what happened in the game was the black king was able to come in a little bit quicker. But white found a very nice resource. E takes f5, king takes f5, king c6, king e6, and white played bishop to c5. And this is a very classic position, a really good one to end on. Okay, a knight at the edge of the board can only go to 4 squares, and a bishop can control all 4 of those squares if it's 3 away from the knight. So this is a really good position to remember. If you want to dominate a knight with the bishop, just put your bishop 3 away from it. Okay, so the knight's not trapped by any means. The knight could always go to here, but then the point is bishop takes knight, king takes. We're in a king and pawn endgame, a pawn up. The king will just come to here and queen this pawn. So hi there, Jesse F. c4 is too computerish in my opinion. c4, c4. Yeah, I mean, very hard to see c4. But I mean, the philosophy is you're keeping the pawns on the dark squares, and so then this bishop is, yeah. Or you're saying 41 c4. No, not 41c4, the other one. Yeah. So this is a very nice, and after this move, black resigned. Actually, in this position, I was in the game chat watching all these games. I was in the game chat watching. Bishop to f8 was my preference in this position, and actually this is also killing, because if black were to make a move like h5, you can actually then come in and take this knight, and the knight is trapped. And if the knight were to go here, actually king here. So not only is the bishop great, but actually there's a pawn behind the bishop. So that's an interesting thing, right? So we all know now that a bishop dominates a knight if it's 3 away. But if the knight can't even fall to this square here behind, because there's a pawn, then it's like even more dominated. So bishop here was also nice, because after knight here, you just go king here, and the knight is trapped by this pawn. Even if we weren't winning these pawns, which is also another way of completely winning. So yeah. So that was the assassin in white game. Okay, let's quickly look at the final game, which was just last week. Réal Robert as black in the French defense managed to. It was 3.5, 3.5 in this game. We have a winner, and white just set up his minors in a quite awkward fashion and found his bishop trapped. So Réal Robert was a piece up, but he wasn't satisfied in winning the game in a boring fashion. So instead he won the game in an interesting fashion. So first he self-pins his queen and sacks the exchange for a couple of pawns. And I'm going far too quickly, but it's getting late. And then he self-pins his queen a second time. And at this point, me and Kia, who's in the chat, Yellow, were watching and we're thinking, oh no, don't do this because of this. And then Kia said, wait. So we had to think, what? Is there something? And we both saw the following combination. Knight here attacking the rook. Okay, so the rook has to move. And then knight takes g4. With the idea that, okay, you can take my knight, but then I take your queen. But Réal Robert has something else up his sleeve, which is knight takes d3. The idea that if you take the knight, I take your rook. So even more interesting in a way. Slightly weaker, but also really interesting. g5 hits the queen was not the best. Probably the best was just to take the knight and to lose your rook. But okay, he hit the queen. So the queen moved, queen e5, best move from Réal Robert. Rook f3, knight b2. And probably, yeah, and then this is the mistake of the game. Mekumku went rook b1 and just lost his queen, which is not ideal. Probably queen to b3 was really interesting. So actually, let's just look how the game finished. Yeah, black just defended everything, and white resigned. But he just didn't notice his queen was hanging, which is unfortunate for him. If he goes queen b3, just to show you how interesting the game still is in a way, Réal Robert, despite being a piece up, really made this game very interesting. Okay, so naturally, a natural move is knight to c4 with the idea we're going to fork the king and the queen. And we're also hitting the rook. So that looks devastating, but unfortunately white's got one defense, rook to d1. We want to develop our bishop, so we play b6 to develop our bishop. Now white's got a very interesting idea. Well, he's losing, so he has to go all out on the attack. So he goes b6. Now, what if we were to do a move like h6? That might seem reasonable, just so to stop any checks. Oh, but checks are not the only danger. After h6, white has queen takes knight. And checkmate. Gotta watch out. this position is not so simple. Okay, so bishop a6 is a really nice move because it stops queen takes knight and it covers the back rank. So white might go rook h3 just to try and really push those pawns. Takes, and okay, queen to h3, really try and double up. Okay, and do check and hide away. Okay, so it's a little precarious for our king with all this. And we're in Crazy House, we'd be really worried about this move because after takes, the opponent would have another piece in hand. But actually, if white goes here, check, takes, he's only got the queen left, so it's not so dangerous. In the meantime, we have this check. We have a free piece. Okay, he's going for a mate in one threat here, so we throw in this check and this check, and the idea is just to distract the queen. If the queen doesn't take that, those two knights cut off this. The queen cuts off this. So if, for example, the king were to run here or to here or to here, then if it runs to either of these two squares, we have knight takes f2 being an idea, and if it were to run to here, we must have something. We have knight back to f3. That's not really that interesting. So if king runs here, what do we do? So what I was saying is if the king runs to here, we have knight takes pawn. King takes knight is kind of forced, but then we have queen here check. King here is kind of forced, but then we have queen here check, and that's checkmate. So that any move like that's no good. So you'd have to go back to g1 if he doesn't take the knight. And then, can anyone see a mate? Yeah, then we have, hang on, do we have this? Maybe this doesn't work. Just having a look. Rook here, check. No, this is not working, is it? Yeah, this is not going to work. King can go here. Ooh, it's almost working, but no. So should I turn on engine? Okay, let's turn on engine. Knight. Oh, just knight takes g6. Okay, yeah, I hadn't seen that. Yeah, this. king to g1. Yeah, this was funny, but it's a draw apparently. After king takes h2, knight takes g6. I can't believe it's actually a draw, but like, who's fighting for the draw? I see. We just get a repetition on the king. So black can force the draw. But okay, just the point is in this position, queen takes knight is forced, so we distract the queen from the mate threat, and then we can take his rook. So and the point is now we're threatening rook takes pawn check. So anyway, he might throw in a couple of checks, but we eventually find safety. Okay, so that was just some idea of a line if white had gone queen b3 and fought on. But okay, he didn't. He hung his queen, and so it was game over. Very solid play from Real Robert. Okay, so thanks everyone for watching. Sorry this wasn't a proper review of the first 2 weeks. It was maybe a review of 50% of the first 2 weeks. And I didn't do as many puzzles or interactive stuff as I'd have liked. Partly because of time, and partly because not enough people in chat. But okay. Thanks everyone for watching. Yeah, this wasn't this really wasn't as instructive perhaps as the last stream I did in classical chess on the games of Zero, but hopefully there's been some interesting stuff. Okay, see you everyone. Bye.